Russia, the world's gas station, the energy superpower that threatened to freeze Europe. Today, they can't even fuel their own gas stations. From the occupied shores of Crimea to the glittering streets of Moscow to the frozen steppes of Siberia, panic has gripped the entire country. This isn't a panic about missiles. This is a panic about pumps. The tanks are empty, the trucks are stuck on the roads, and the people are furious. Vladimir Putin cut off his own country's fuel to fill the tanks of his invasion force in Ukraine. Rosneft's brutal 200-liter fuel limit has crippled Russia's logistical backbone. They call it a temporary shortage. We call it geographical euthanasia. The Kremlin has decided which cities stay warm and which cities freeze. This is the silent, cold catastrophe unfolding behind the Iron Curtain. Let's start with the event that triggered the chaos. Rosneft's massive Siberian oil refinery has halted operations. This isn't just a factory shutting down. This is the collapse of Russia's economic heart valve. When a giant like Siberian goes offline due to Ukrainian drone attacks and cascading technical failures, the ripples turn into a tsunami. Why is there no fuel? Because the factories are broken. But his physical damage isn't the only cause. The real disaster is hidden in the financial statements. Russia's oil and gas revenues are expected to fall by as much as 35%. That's not just a statistic. That's official proof that Putin's war chest is bottoming out. Low oil prices and crushing tax burdens are drying up the cash flow of Russian energy giants. A 35% revenue loss means billions of rubles evaporating. What does that mean in practice? The Kremlin can't subsidize fuel prices, can't repair refineries, can't import gasoline from abroad. With state coffers empty, oil companies would rather shut down than sell at a loss. So, while Ukrainian drones physically strike refineries, global market conditions and sanctions hit them financially. It's a double whammy. Russia is drowning in crude oil, but dying from a gasoline shortage and a cash crisis. This is the greatest paradox of a failed energy superpower. Fuel can't reach the pumps. When fuel stops, trucks stop. And when trucks stop in a country spanning 11 time zones, the country dies. The Russian government imposed a strict limit on diesel sales for trucks, 200 liters per vehicle. For those living in Europe or the US, that might sound reasonable, but in Russia, it's a joke. Heavy trucks consume massive amounts of fuel, especially in winter when engines must run 24/7 at -40 degrees Celsius to prevent freezing. The 200-liter limit doesn't even cover a one-way trip from Moscow to St. Petersburg. That means the driver has to stop every few hundred kilometers, wait in line for hours, beg for fuel, and maybe get stranded in the middle of nowhere. It turns a one-day delivery into a 3-day ordeal. The country's logistical lifeline is clogged with bureaucracy and scarcity. But for drivers in the north, this isn't just an inconvenience. It's a death sentence. We need to talk about Zimniks. 60% of Russian territory has no asphalt roads. None. For millions of people living in Yakutia, Yamal, and the Arctic Circle, the only lifeline is Zimniks. Temporary roads built over frozen swamps and rivers. Ice roads. These roads only exist in winter. All food, all medicine, and most importantly, all the coal needed to heat these cities must be delivered now, before the ice melts. But the trucks are stuck. If a truck carrying coal to a mining town in Yakutia runs out of diesel on a frozen river, hundreds of kilometers from civilization, two things happen. Either the driver freezes to death, or that town doesn't get the coal it needs to run its heating plant. This is what we call geographical euthanasia. By diverting fuel to tanks in Donbass, the Kremlin has decided to cut life support to its own northern regions. They're sacrificing their own citizens to the cold to keep the war machine running. There's another terrifying aspect: electricity. Many remote Russian towns are far from the power grid. They rely on diesel generators for electricity. If trucks don't bring diesel, the lights go out, water pumps stop, central heating systems fail. In Siberia, if heating stops for 4 hours, pipes burst, buildings freeze. They become uninhabitable. By restricting fuel to these regions, the Kremlin is risking a cascade of infrastructure failures that could leave tens of thousands homeless in the middle of the Arctic winter. When the state fails, sharks start circling. We're witnessing the explosion of a massive black market. Today, diesel is the new currency in Russia. The official price at the pump is meaningless because the pump is empty. The real price is what you pay in cash in a dark alley behind the station. This is the rise of the diesel mafia. Truck drivers who managed to find fuel sell their allocated 200 liters to desperate locals at triple the price. Corrupt military officials divert army fuel tankers to the black market instead of the front lines. This creates a parallel economy the Kremlin can't tax or control. It undermines state discipline. If you have to commit a crime to get to work, the social contract is broken. This desperation is intense, not only in the north, but also in the south. Let's look at Crimea. Reports from the occupied peninsula paint a picture of Mad Max-style anarchy. The fuel shortage is so severe that people have started stealing gasoline from parked cars at night. Crimea is the main logistics hub for the southern front. The army is sucking up every drop of diesel. Civilians are left with dry pumps and empty tanks. When people start stealing fuel from their neighbors, society is collapsing. The dark 1990s are returning, but this time there's a war at the door. But the most frightening consequence isn't about cars or trucks. It's about food. Modern agriculture runs on diesel.
Tractors, harvesters, irrigation pumps, they all need fuel. Farmers usually stock up on fuel in winter, ready for planting season in spring. Right now, they can't stock up on anything. The depots are empty. If farmers can't get diesel now, they won't be able to plant in April. If they don't plant in April, there's no harvest in September. Russia is one of the world's largest grain exporters, but this self-inflicted fuel crisis is sowing the seeds of a major food shortage. Bread prices are already rising in Russia. Next year, bread could become a luxury item. Putin is trading next year's bread for this week's war. After the cold comes hunger. If you watch Russian state television, you might think everything is fine. The Moscow Times discusses whether the crisis is real based on official data. The data may show stability, but reality on the ground screams chaos. Moscow and St. Petersburg are the regime's showrooms. The Kremlin ensures these cities are fed and fueled to prevent protests. But outside the ring road, that's a completely different country. A 200-liter limit may be a nuisance in the capital, but in the regions, it's a disaster. Supermarket shelves in Moscow are full, creating the illusion of normalcy. But this is a mirage. The supply chain filling those shelves is about to break. And when the trucks stop, prices skyrocket. The cost of basic winter necessities is expected to rise by 30 to 40%. Why? Because transportation costs have doubled. If it takes 3 times longer for a truck to deliver goods due to fuel queues, the price of those goods triples. For a wealthy Muscovite, this is an inconvenience. For a pensioner in Omsk living on $150 a month, it's a tragedy. They have to choose, buy food or buy a coat to survive minus 30 degrees Celsius. This is a shift from an availability crisis to an affordability crisis. But Russia isn't just besieged by its own mistakes. It's also under siege by one of the most insidious logistical wars in history, waged by its neighbors. Poland and the Baltic states didn't just close their borders. They turned bureaucracy into a weapon. Focus on the Kukuryki-Kozlovichi border crossing, the only remaining lifeline for trucks traveling from Europe to Russia. Over the past 3 months, this lifeline has been deliberately choked. Polish customs guards subject every truck, every pallet, every document to microscopic scrutiny on suspicion of dual-use goods. The result? The time it takes to cross the border has increased from 12 hours to 14 days. 14 days, waiting in a metal cabin in sub-zero temperatures. The Lithuanian and Latvian borders have turned into frozen parking lots formed by thousands of stationary trucks. With the western gates locked, Russia turned to the east, to friendly Kazakhstan and China. But what they found there was an even greater disaster. Between September and November 2025, Kazakhstan's Customs Administration launched unprecedented, harsh inspections of goods bound for Russia to avoid secondary sanctions from the West. The result? More than 10,000 trucks stranded at the Kazakh border. At the Mashtakovo crossing alone,
There's a backlog of 7,500 trucks. Some drivers have been forced to live in their vehicles for up to 47 days. The trucks aren't just carrying luxury goods. They contain vital medicines, insulin, antibiotics, spare parts for medical devices. A 300% increase in logistics costs and months of delays have triggered a pharmacy roulette in Russian pharmacies. Even if you find the medicine, the price is now unaffordable. For chronic patients, this blockade is a silent death sentence. Sources: The Moscow Times, Eurasianet, Reuters. When machine parts that should come from China and Kazakhstan don't arrive, factories shut down. Russian industry is in a phase of technological cannibalism. That is, they're dismantling one machine to use its parts to run another. But this isn't sustainable. Production lines are slowing everywhere, from the car factory in Tolyatti to the metallurgical plant in the Urals. This means forced leave, pay cuts, and ultimately mass unemployment. So let's look at the big picture. This isn't an embargo imposed by the West. This is a logistical heart attack caused by the Kremlin's own choices. They chose to invade Ukraine. They chose to leave their refineries unprotected. They chose to prioritize tanks over trucks. Now the consequences are here. The geographical euthanasia of the Russian North has begun. Putin believes the Russian people will endure anything for the sake of the war. Frozen homes, empty pockets, stolen fuel. But human resilience has limits, especially when the cold sets in. What do you think? Can Russian regions survive this winter without fuel? Will the Zimnik crisis spark an uprising in the north? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe, hit the bell, because this collapse is just beginning. This is Global Power Report. We watch the fall, so you can see what's coming.